year was 1994, and the thin 9-year-old Donnie Wonderful was fully engulfed in the kayfabe world of the WWF New Generation era. I'll be the first to admit, it was gimmick heavy, but if you probe a little closer, the champions, the contenders, and the rivalries made for some classic wrestling. And my favorite contributor to some of the classic content of that year was the excellence of execution, Bret the Hitman Hart. To say that I was a Bret Hart fanatic was a gross understatement. In the early 90s, I distinctly remember gravitating towards him because I felt he was the underdog no one would ever expect to reach the mountaintop. But he was also so extraordinarily great at wrestling that you couldn't be that surprised when he finally did grab the brass ring. Everything about Bret was welcoming to me. It was often highlighted that he came from a huge legendary wrestling family, and also spotted regularly were his parents, brothers, and sisters in the arena there to support him. That came across to me as someone who valued their family's legacy. Aside from that, his signature color was pink, one of the most unalarming but friendly and welcoming colors a man could wear. And the icing on the cake? His pre-match ritual. He would hop out of the ring in search of a lucky kid and dress them in his signature Hitman sunglasses. Everything about Bret Hart connected with me, and I was emotionally submerged in his character and exploits. And in 1994, I was there to witness the triumphant highs and the agonizing lows. So let's get into 1994 as a Bret Hart fan. Now, I'm going to focus on and reference the primary pay-per-views to highlight the climatic events that unfolded throughout the year, but I'll backtrack a bit to Survivor Series 1993, which took place in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts. Survivor Series 1993 saw the Hart brothers successfully defeat Shawn Michaels and his Knights. It was a dominant performance by the Hart brothers, with only the youngest brother Owen being eliminated. And here is where things took a turn for the worse. Owen returned to the ring amongst the Hart family celebration and openly pushed and argued with Bret and the family, resulting in him getting booed out of the building. In the months between the Survivor Series and the 1994 Royal Rumble, Bret and Owen were able to reconcile and team up to challenge the Quebecers for the tag team titles. January 1994, the Quebecers versus the former two-time tag team champion, former two-time Intercontinental champion, and former WWF heavyweight champion Bret the Hitman Hart and his younger brother Owen. The anticipation was high, and I was ambitious to see Bret and Owen become the new tag team champions. But unfortunately, the stars weren't aligned for that to happen. The match was stopped and awarded to the Quebecers due to an injury to Bret's leg where he could no longer perform. And after the match, Owen kicks him in the same leg, jeopardizing his participation in the 30-man Royal Rumble the same night. Seeing this absolutely crushed me. The image of him being carted off backstage sabotaged the entire evening, and I had a real hard time engaging in the rest of the show because of it. As the Royal Rumble match began, I watched with a sense of loathing in my heart. And then came the 27th entrant. Limping from the bowels of the Providence Civic Center emerged Bret Hart, and I was more than ecstatic. The Hitman competed in and was the co-winner of the 1994 Royal Rumble. The conclusion of the Royal Rumble match had me on pins and needles. Okay, so they both went over the top rope, but one ref saw Bret Hart hit the ground first, so Lex Luger won, but that was overruled by another ref who saw Luger hit the ground first. So then Bret won, but that was overruled as well. In the end, the only unanimous decision was that they both won, which was vindication for me and completely redeemed the entire night. From there, a program would kick off in the spring of 1994, which would put Bret against his younger brother Owen. After losing a coin toss on Monday Night Raw, Bret would have to compete twice at WrestleMania 10, both opening and closing the show. The opening bout in WrestleMania 10 is pure 5-star wrestling magic, and the result left me speechless. Not only did Owen beat Bret clean, but the Hitman re-injured his leg. How can he effectively compete for the heavyweight title on one leg? The shock of the upset was overwhelming enough. Now I had to worry about whether or not he'd be able to compete effectively. And as it would play out, Yokozuna would be awarded the victory over Lex Luger via disqualification, gearing us up for another David vs. Goliath WrestleMania main event rematch. How can Bret beat Yokozuna on one leg? He lost to him the year before. My optimistically naive faith in my 9-year-old mind made it possible to make it throughout the remainder of WrestleMania 10. And boy, was that faith rewarded. He did it. Bret beat Yokozuna and became the WWF champion for the second time. Another great pay-per-view, another emotional roller coaster ride full of turmoil, then triumph, but a perfect way to end WrestleMania 10. Bret Hart fans, we were in great spirits. We were riding high heading into the King of the Ring of that year. Bret was to defend his title against the Intercontinental Champion Diesel with an added surprise. Bret's longtime companion and former tag team partner Jim the Anvil Neidhart returned after a 2-year hiatus to back up and support the Hitman. Bret vs. Diesel 1 was the first great Jim in their trilogy of matches. But, unfortunately to my chagrin, it ended in Bret being disqualified due to outside interference. Near the end of the match, Bret really looked vulnerable and it seemed like he was about to lose. I have to admit, it wasn't the most upstanding way to hold on to the title, but we still left King of the Ring as the champion. So for that night, and that night only, I was able to compromise my moral turpitude. Then came the swerve of the night. In the final round of the King of the Ring tournament, Jim Neidhart came to the aid of Owen Hart, Bret's fiercest rival at the time, and helped him win the King of the Ring. He then revealed that his intentions were just to make sure that Bret Hart left the King of the Ring with the title so Owen can fight him for it. Trust me, I was glad to get out of the King of the Ring 1994. Moving along, the summer was full of bad blood, animosity, and family feuding for Bret Hart, and it was set to sizzle off at the 1994 SummerSlam in Chicago. With a host of family and in-laws ringside, Bret was set to defend his WWF title against Owen Hart in a steel cage match. We finally were granted a moment of redemption to atone for the loss suffered at WrestleMania 10. Bret and Owen once again delivered in climatic fashion, and we were treated with another phenomenal match. Though victorious, the immediate aftermath of the match saw my beloved champion getting pummeled by Owen and Jim, with them escaping before the rest of the family could intercede. SummerSlam 1994 was a great event, but it was bittersweet for me. Yeah, we won this battle, but it was far from over. Now, Bret and Owen would agree to have one final singles match for the WWF title shortly after to cap off their rivalry. With Bret scoring the victory, it seemed as if this chapter would finally close. However, Owen was like a pesky migraine headache that just would not go away. And enter in Survivor Series 1994. Emotionally, for a 9-year-old Bret Hart fan, this was equivalent to the Titanic sinking to the depths of the Atlantic Ocean to me. Bret Hart vs. Bob Backlund in a submission match where you can only win if the person in your opponent's corner threw in the towel. In Bret's corner, you had the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, and in Backlund's corner, Owen Hart. Never at a loss for ways to keep his older brother under duress, it was Owen Hart that heavily influenced the climatic outcome of this match. With Bret's cornerman incapacitated, Bret found himself at the mercy of a seemingly inescapable submission move, the crossface chicken wing. With both parents ringside to witness the agony, Owen convinced their mother to throw in the towel. Your new WWF champion, Bob Backlund. Owen snatched the towel and sprinted backstage, celebrating the corruption he'd contributed to. The last visual of Bret Hart in 1994 showed him being assisted to the backstage area, writhing in pain and taking one last look at Bob Backlund celebrating in the ring in front of a stunned crowd. I was completely distraught. I couldn't believe Bret's second title reign could end this way. I managed to watch and somewhat enjoy the rest of the Survivor Series 1994, but for that to be the concluding image of my favorite champion was too devastating to bear. Now, the aftermath of Survivor Series 1994 would have Bob Backlund losing the belt just 3 days later to Diesel in 8 seconds at Madison Square Garden. But that did little to ease the pain, and the end of 1994 for the die-hard Bret Hart fan was full of questions and doubts. Man, by far, it was the dramatic, soul-stirring year riding the wave with the excellence of execution. One for the records. 1994 was a crazy year for all the Bret Hart supporters. And as I reminisce on that year being a die-hard Bret Hart fan, it was one hell of a ride. And I never would have thought that it could possibly get more emotionally turbulent than this. Until 1997. But we'll save that madness for the next video. This is Donnie Wonderful from Smart Tank Revolution. Thank you for watching.